Some of those drug trends that you mentioned earlier in your presentation, some of those were saying that you were mentioning that it's very important to highlight so many people that don't drink, for example, that don't do drugs. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think what we tend to do in this country and once again around the world is we always talk about those people who are involved in negative activity, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think it particularly helps young people if we talk about the positive, we accentuate the positive. We talk about the huge number of young people who aren't involved in illicit drugs. We talk about the majority of young people who don't drink to excess regularly. What it does is it makes them feel good about their choices, and also makes them feel like they are in the big group, which of course is exactly what many of them want to be. I think what some people don't realise is that we have a significant proportion of young people who actually choose not to drink or describe themselves as non-drinkers. In Year 11 and Year 12, we have around about between 20 and 25% of 16 to 17-year-olds who actually describe themselves as non-drinkers. That's a pretty considerable proportion of young people that we never talk about. And of course, when they're younger, it's about 1/3 of year 10s. If you believe the papers, if you believe some of the tabloid TV programs, you would think that every young person drinks. And that's simply not true.
Have you made any progress since 2009, do you reckon?
No, I don't. I think we're actually going backwards. I think that the healthcare system is basically set up to meet the needs of adults. I don't think it's set up to meet the needs of teenagers, and nowhere is that clearer than in mental health. When people say to me Australia's got the highest youth suicide rate in the world, which it never has and never will have, it's a nonsense because we use different techniques to measure it. So I think what we can say to you is that Australia has a situation where 1 in 5 young people have a serious psychological problem prior to the age of 18, and that about half of those kids with the most serious problems never get treated, and that's unacceptable.
And in your experience, why do so many young people suffer from depression or anxiety in silence?
I think there's a huge stigma around the whole area of mental health. They inherited it from generations where we just didn't talk about this stuff. To be mentally ill was to be weak, to be unmanly, and I think that's a theme that has basically gone down through the generations, and it's firmly entrenched now, sadly.
And what are we trying to do as a community or as a nation to try to overcome that?
Well, in the last 7 years, Beyond Blue, the National Depression Initiative, has started up, and I think it's made some headway in getting people to think about mental illness in the same way that we talk about physical illness. But even they would admit that we've got a long way to go. We've done a great job with adults, but we've got a long way to go with young people and with old people.
Okay, so I think as we said there are the behavioural signs that we see. Young people are starting to avoid meals, stopping eating their favourite foods, also isolating themselves from their family and friends, focusing much more on their weight and shape. And the physical symptoms that we see is people, they start to lose weight, they get quite cold, their hair gets dry, and then you get problems like fatigue and fainting, and by the time that happens, that's when people should really be worried about that.
Now you mentioned that it's highly frequent with a lot of females, young females, but do males have a lot of the same problems as well?
Look, absolutely. We see males less commonly presenting to hospitals with eating disorders, but the younger age group, under the age of about 12, they're still 1 in 4 of the presentations. The other thing is we know that young boys being unhappy about the way they look is really common. So 2/3 of young boys are unhappy. So some feel they're overweight and wanting to lose weight, and others are wanting to get that sort of lean, muscular physique, which is really promoted in the media now.
And just finally, what are we doing to combat this, to try and give some more support about this? What is happening in Australia?
Look, I think what is happening more recently is the government has finally realised that it's a significant problem and is trying to put together resources to provide education to health professionals, to education professionals.
So just in terms of your introduction and the way that you approach coming out and doing a presentation like you just did, what inspires you to do that? To do it in your own way, creatively?
Well, my background's in writing comedy and performing comedy, so I always take a bit of a satirical look at whatever I'm dealing with, even though it's sexualisation is quite a difficult topic to talk about on a lot of levels. I think it can be engaging and quite powerful to have some satire around it. You know, sometimes if you get people laughing, you can really dig the knife in and drive the message home in a really sharp way. When we're talking about sexualisation, we're not talking about sex or sexuality. You know, that sex and sexuality is a naturally unfolding process in all human beings. Sexualisation, however, is when adult sexualised content is imposed on young kids before they're ready to deal with it. So it's a very different topic, and some people get them confused. Some people, think that, I'm anti-sex, which is crazy, but it has been written before. That's not what it's about. It's not about prudery, it's not about being a wowser. It's about being really concerned about the impacts on young kids' mental health and well-being.
And in terms of where it's happening, you mentioned during your speech that there are a few places, like in your local area, for example, where you do take your kids where it is happening. Can you just repeat some of those examples?
Well, really, the environment is wallpapered with sexualised imagery, outdoor billboards, advertising in all arenas, porn magazines in 7-Elevens, milk bars, petrol stations, highly sexualised music video clips on prime children's viewing hours, Saturday and Sunday mornings, young girls' magazines. It's really the message that girls' value comes from how hot and sexy they are. Just comes from so many different arenas. It's constant.
And you mentioned a few groups, like one of your own, for example, that you've set up trying to combat this issue. Can you mention some of what things are we doing to try and stop this or reduce it?
Well, what I encourage people to do always is speak out and complain a lot, because it does make a difference. Complain, because people are listening. And companies figure if they get one complaint, it represents quite a lot of people who are not happy. Ultimately, if we keep complaining, we're helping to create change. They can't ignore what the community wants in the end. Yeah, don't be complacent. Speak out. Create a group. It's so easy to create a group amongst your colleagues or friends or family, other family members, and give yourself a name. It actually helps. And utilise that group to go to industries, go to the retailers, the advertisers, the marketers, and to present your case, and to use it as a vehicle to complain. It's actually quite helpful. So it's been helpful for me.
And your motivation to try and shift this change, where was the motivation born?
My motivation is purely because, my motivation was born out of my concern about what my own kids were being exposed to. It was so obvious to me. Maybe being a performer, I'm very tuned into what's going on in my environment. I have acute observational skills, you could say. And so it was pretty blatant to me what was going on, and it was problematic. So I thought, I want to do something about this.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think what I come up against is people feeling powerless, like they can't make a difference, and we've got to get over that leap. I think examples I give are if highly sexualized video was examples I give people to help them get over that feeling of powerlessness. If a highly sexualized billboard was put in a small country town, it wouldn't last more than a day, because the community would take action. In the cities, we get a little bit lost. We sort of see a billboard and we drive past it. We might not be happy about it, but we just keep driving and think, don't like that. But we don't have a sense of ownership. We don't think, actually, I can do something about that. And that's what I try and let people know. You actually can do something about that. Your voice is going to help create change. We want a revolution here.
Look, the research shows that sexualising girls and objectifying women contributes to a number of negative physical and mental health outcomes. These include eating disorders, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, poor academic performance, and self-harming behaviours. So it's a really serious issue. In Australia, we have 1 in 100 adolescent girls with anorexia, 1 in between 5 and 10 bulimic. We have 1 in 4 teenage girls in Australia wanting to have cosmetic surgery because they hate their bodies so much. And self-harm is a primary reason that girls between 13 and 19 are hospitalised. And all of these behaviours have been linked with the objectification of women and sexualisation of girls in the media and popular culture. There are so many examples. There's a pole dancing kit for little girls to be able to learn how to pole dance and earn money for their sexy dances. There are games like Miss Bimbo, in which a girl is awarded points that help her become the world's hottest bimbo. She gets those points by having breast implants, losing weight and picking up boys in the bimbo club. And that game is being played by 10-year-old girls around the world. There's another game called My Minx, in which the girl adopts an avatar personality, a second life personality, who is a prostituted woman. So she lives out the life of a prostituted woman and buys the morning after pill and adopts third world children. So she's being taught how to be a humanitarian at the same time as being a prostitute. Weekend music video clips which tie sex and violence very closely. Women are presented as sexually voracious, insatiable, always wanting more and wanting to be mistreated as well. So, you know, it's just totally enculturated and entrenched at every level of society.
And what age group is this targeted? Is this mainly affecting?
Well, the effects are now being played out on preschool girls, on primary school girls. In the past, these behaviours we might have seen in the mid to late teens, now we're seeing 8-year-old girls being hospitalised with eating disorders. Very little girls are starting to engage in these practices of self-objectification and self-surveillance and compare and despair, where they're comparing their bodies with the bodies of their friends and often finding they don't think they're good enough. So it's affecting every age group, but the age group affected is getting younger and younger.
And what is Australia doing to try to combat this?
Well, Australia's not doing enough, and that's why people like me and Julie Gale and other colleagues here at this Generation Next conference are speaking out so loudly about it. Not enough has been done, and that's the reason things are as bad as they are. We're all complicit. But our regulatory bodies, the Advertising Standards Board, the Classification Board, have completely failed us by allowing advertising to get as bad as it is, for example. If a man were to put up a pin-up in his workplace of a naked or semi-naked woman, that would be illegal. That's sexual harassment. It's against the law. But our advertisers and marketers can put up giant ads all over the public domain and that hypersexualise women, that present women as sexual objects, and we're all expected to put up with it. So those bodies have failed us, our governments have failed us. Basically anyone that was supposed to have any responsibility at all has completely let us down, and we need to act personally, of course we do, but we also need those bodies to step up to the plate and help us to make a community that's healthy for children. You know, the famous saying is it takes a village to raise a child. We all need to recognise that. So, you know, I lay a lot of the blame on the girls' magazines. I think they're really unhelpful and hurtful to girls because girls are looking to these magazines for advice on how to live, on relationships, on sexuality, on behaviour, and they're getting really bad advice.
And in what ways can we transform this culture?
Well, the way that I think is good to transform this culture is to join Collective Shout, because what we're doing is bringing together people who are concerned about this issue, and we're naming and shaming and exposing advertisers, corporations and marketers who objectify women and sexualise girls to sell products and services. We are helping them understand the meaning of corporate social responsibility. And we are telling them, if you don't do the right thing, we're not going to support you with our dollar. You see, we have power with our dollar, and we can withdraw that spending from the companies that are doing the wrong thing. We shame them on our website, we expose them, we tell people about them through our Collective Shout website, and we are hoping that that will help bring about change. We also equip people to make complaints to our regulatory bodies and to take it up with their members of parliament. The members of parliament are there to serve us. We've put them there. We're paying them through our taxes to do their job. We need to make our concerns known so that they act in the best interests of our children and young people. People can make those complaints, be bold, be brave, be courageous, and know that it's not just them that have those concerns. They are backed by our organisation, which will support them to do that. And hopefully the more people that act this way, we can turn things around, we can see a positive change.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
Oh, look, I'd love people to join Collective Shout, which is www.collectiveshout.org. Also, they can get a lot of information from my personal website, which is melindatankhard-reist.com. And I'd also love them to have a look at my book, Getting Real, Challenging the Sexualisation of Girls, which brings together experts in the field and demonstrates why the pornification of culture is so damaging to our girls especially.